How's it going, Rogues Gallery, and welcome to another card game video here on Red Zone Rogue. Today, we are talking about aesthetics in card games. I believe to be one of the most important parts of any card game basically out there. In fact, I would argue that it is tied with gameplay as the most important thing for a trading card game. So, that's the topic for today's video. But before we get started, I do want to shout out today's sponsor, FAB, the premier Flesh and Blood deck building and database website. If you're into Flesh and Blood, you owe it to yourself to check out this website. It's what I personally use to build all of my decks, and you know what? I think you should too. And that's not just me saying because they are, sponsoring this video. I actually personally use them to build all of my decks, including all of the new stuff from Tales of Aria. And with that out of the way, let's get started with today's topic. And like I said, it is aesthetics for card games. And when I say aesthetics, I don't just mean artwork, right? I mean the overall aesthetics of the game. Everything from artwork to card borders to legibility to just packaging and marketing and overall theme and flavor. And it's so integral, so absolutely fundamental that I believe most people out there would not even give a game a shot if they did not like how the game looked. And I can say this from personal experience, that is absolutely the case, at least for me. When developers approach me about covering their game, literally the first thing I do is look at the cards and say, hey, do I like the way these look? If the answer is no, then I'm probably not gonna give your game a shot. And that, it's just because that is so important. It's just absolutely important. If you get into the game, you're going to be looking at the cards a lot, not just by playing them, but by collecting them, opening packs. The best recent example I can give is when Eric Olafsson approached me to cover his upcoming card game, Sorcery. And I looked at the cards and I looked at the art and I was like, you know what? Even if I don't like how this plays, this looks amazing. I need to give it a shot. I need to give it a try because I just love the way it looks. At the very least, I can collect the cards. That's something to be said, right? Card games aren't the same for everyone, right? Some people love to play the games. They're only in it to play it. They're only in it to win it. But some people just love the art. They love the lore. They love the flavor. I know more than a few people out there. I know more than a few people watching this video literally only buy cards from card games to collect the artwork. And I know the opposite can be said too. I know there are some people who literally don't care at all about it, and they're only in it for the mechanics and only in it to play and to win and to, maybe make money off of it. But I believe that segment of any card game audience is very small compared to the people who actually do care about the artwork. And I know it's so important to the extent where certain people will gravitate towards certain aspects of a card game just because they like the aesthetics of that aspect. So for example, in Flesh and Blood, if you really, really like a particular hero and the art of the hero and the flavor of the hero, then you're gonna be all in on that hero, I only play Azalea. I only want Azalea cards, that kind of thing. And it really creates like something you can latch onto and something you can connect with in a way that no other aspect of a card game can. And sometimes it's because, you see yourself in the character, or you just like the way they look, or you just like the flavor of it, or you like their story or what they represent. But in any case, it's still very, very important to nail these things, especially if you are a game developer and you're thinking about making a new card game. These are things you need to think about, right? Because these are the things that people are gravitated towards, not just, the powerful stuff, but there's a good chunk of the audience who are just in it for things that they find, appealing and they really, really like. One thing that I was thinking about very recently, in fact, as recent as the previous video, is like not just the art, right? Not just the art, but the borders and the templating of cards. I think that's absolutely integral, almost as important as the quality of the art, because I recently had a video, in fact, like I said, the last video, talking about Force of Will. And Force of Will recently, in the last few sets, changed their borders, and I believe they look not good for many reasons. One, it really looks like they're trying to copy Magic, but in a way that doesn't gel with the game and with the vibe. And there's these just giant text boxes with, just blank, stark area the font isn't sized to the amount of font that there's there. Like it doesn't auto size. So if there's like a couple words, it's a couple tiny little hard to read words. Overall, it just does not look good at all. And the game has great artwork if you're into that anime aesthetic, and their full art cards look fantastic. But just the overall design of the card frames just looks, it's not good. It's not good. I know I'm not the only one who basically dropped the game after they changed the borders. And they've changed the borders a couple times over the years. And you know, Force of Will has been through the ringer. They've been through a lot of different stuff. And it's really interesting, like what the final straw is for someone. And for me, it was these borders, because I really wasn't playing all that much. And with the change, I really had no desire to collect because I didn't like the way they looked. I mean, even if I couldn't play the game on a regular basis, it would still be fun to collect and get all the cool looking cards. Well, they don't look good anymore. So that was kind of like the nail in the coffin for me. And you can contrast that with something like Flesh and Blood that has a myriad of card borders, but all of the borders are so flavorful and fit so well with the world. If you don't know, in Flesh and Blood, a lot of the borders signify either a talent or where a hero is from, and so each region has its like own border. And so you can kind of tell just by a quick glance, oh, they're from Aria, they're from Volcor, or whatever. And it just adds like more flavor and adds just like this great sense of world building and atmosphere and just overall great aesthetics. And that, coupled with the fantastic artwork, really goes a long way to just drawing people into the game, because it just looks absolutely fantastic. You can tell that they spent a ton of time working on all of these borders because they know that the borders are that important. And I want to extend that also out to like packaging and I don't want to say marketing stuff, but like, you know, booster packs and booster boxes and just the way they look. And I think Flesh and Blood absolutely nails it. Their booster boxes look what I would consider to be very classic and old school looking, and that's exactly the vibe that they were going for, especially the first two sets, Arcane Rising and Welcome to Wraith. And I think they absolutely nailed it. It reminds me of like an old artifact you'd find in like a D&D campaign or something, and I definitely think that's what they were going for, compared to some other games. And we're not gonna name names in this one, but some of them are just very bland, mono-colored with just some key art slapped on top. Sometimes it looks good and sometimes it looks really bad. I think Magic the Gathering is pretty good at this, making it look pretty good. Most Magic products look pretty good, but a lot of the times it's just because they have so much shelf space at local game stores. You just see all of the Magic products. And you know, Magic has fantastic artwork, but my big critique of Magic artwork, at least modern Magic artwork, is a lot of it is homogenized. A lot of the artwork just looks the same. It's great, you know, it's great detailed artwork, but it all just kind of blends together. And I think that's by design, right? They want everything to look like it all belongs in the same world, but I think that's also a detriment to the game, just because nothing really stands out. Nothing looks super unique or anything like that. I'm sure there's some outliers here and there, and you know, this is true for a lot of games too. I mean, even Flesh and Blood, like I was talking about, some cards look absolutely iconic and some cards just kind of blend together. It's just, you know, something that a lot of card games need to work on, in my opinion. And that also extends into playability, right? So this part of aesthetics, just like card art uniqueness, I think is so important for multiple reasons. And in fact, I think it might be one of the most important parts, other than like just drawing new players into your game. Because, you know, when you see a new card game at the LGS and it looks great on the shelf, you're like, oh, I want to play that one, it looks really cool. There's that, obviously, but just card art uniqueness and recognizability is so important, because when you're playing the game, right, when someone plays a card from you, if you can immediately recognize what that card is, it goes a long way to basically just help competitive environments. It just helps card recognition. It just makes games quicker. And it not only does that, it definitely does that, but it also makes cards, I mean, I said it already, it makes them iconic. And if a card is iconic, you remember it and you have like this emotional attachment to it, whether good or bad, right? If it's like a, you know, an iconic card that you're like, oh, I hate that card because it always kills me, or it's really annoying to play against, or it's busted or whatever. Or it's you're like, oh, it's a really iconic card because it's really sweet and flavorful and has a cool janky effect that I love. You want to have these emotions from your fan base, right? You want to make them, you know, drawn to your cards and to have these emotional connections. And I think really unique art, it does that. Some games, like I said, like a Magic, they can kind of blend together. There's definitely some unique cards, especially in older Magic the Gathering. Like, for example, Shivan Dragon, the original Shivan Dragon, one of my favorite art of all time, and you can debate whether it's like good art or bad art, but I love Melissa Benson. And that is a piece of artwork that has stuck with me my entire life because for me, it was so iconic. It was like a really, really iconic Magic the Gathering piece. Same with Vesuvan Doppelganger by Quentin Hoover. Absolutely fantastic. And the fact that I remember these artists' names, you know, right off the top of my head. Well, first of all, I'm a huge supporter of artists in general, but the fact that I remember them and I've kept their names like, you know, close to me ever since I was a kid says a lot for it, right? What is it that draws you to a card game? Is it the aesthetics? Is it the artwork? Are you solely drawn for the mechanics or because, you know, a friend told you to play? I'm very curious to know, because like for me personally, it's the art, right? That's the first thing I look at when I'm approached by a new card game or a new developer. I look at the art, and if the art looks good, that says multiple things to me, right? That says that one, they care enough to spend a lot of money to make sure that their game looks good, and they understand how important the aesthetics are. Also the card frames and the templating, that's all very, very important. Some of the newer games that have come out, I'm not going to name names here, but I've just looked at them and I'm like, it doesn't look great. And I think one of the most polarizing examples of this, and I will name a name here, is Metazoo, right? Because so many people said that they will not try the game, they will not touch the game because they hate the artwork. But I've also heard the opposite, that people love the artwork and they only care about it because of the artwork and because it reminds them of like old school Pokemon. And once again, that is the emotion that you want, right? You definitely want all the positive emotions that, you know, people want to play the game because they love the art, but you don't want people to say, oh, that looks bland, I don't care. Or like, oh yeah, you know, I guess whatever. Like that's the thing you want to avoid, right? You want to elicit strong emotions either way. And I think Metazoo does a good job at that. In fact, I think one of the strengths of Metazoo is how polarizing it is, because it gets people talking about it and more people keep talking about it. And some people are like, hey, I love this game. And some people are like, no, I hate that game. And the more people talk about it, the more like traction it gets on the internet. And I do really think that's one of the reasons why Metazoo kind of like rose up from nothing basically. And there's a couple of things I really didn't want to talk about in this video that we might talk about later, and that is artwork itself, because art is subjective and the way something looks and whether you like it is very, very subjective. Unless you're critiquing it from like an actual skill and art standpoint, a lot of it is super subjective. You know, if you like the dark fantasy style stuff, then you might like Flesh and Blood. If you like the, you know, anime waifu stuff, then you might like something like We Cross, where, you know, that kind of stuff is going to be very like, you know, hit and miss, all on your personal, you know, basically your personal interest, if you like it or if you don't like it. And then the other thing is card treatments and alternate art and special foilings and all that kind of stuff. I think that can be saved for a different video. I do think it's very important, but I don't think it's really what gets people into the game. Maybe some people do, right? But like when you're initially looking at a game, you're not like, oh, the foiling looks cool, I want to play it. It's more of like the overall themes and, you know, aesthetics and art rather than special alternate art or foil treatments or something like that. Though I do think those are very, very important for card games, especially for making something special for people. I think that goes more into collecting and more into like player and collector retention than just getting people into the game or getting people interested in the game. Because, you know, I think it's a big deal. And some games do an amazing job at that, and some games don't do a good job at it at all. Once again, we're going to use a couple examples here. I think Flesh and Blood does an amazing job with alternate art cards and cold foil cards. And because a lot of the alternate art cards, they don't announce at all. Like you'll open up a pack and you'll be like, what? Was this art always like this in first edition? And it, you know, it wasn't. They just launched it without showing or telling anyone. And that is super cool. I mean, that's a whole other thing, right? Like community discovery. Flesh and Blood does that fantastically. And then some games, like Magic the Gathering, kind of overload with the whole alt art and frame treatments and different special fancy things to the point where it's not special or fancy at all. It looks great. I mean, it does look great, but it doesn't feel special if you just have a ton and they're all over the place. It just looks great. In that regards, I don't consider them as more of like a special treatment. I just consider them as just part of the game, right? Just a normal part of the game, rather than like a cool, special, unique thing like the Twinning Blade in Flesh and Blood, where there's like a full art version of the Twinning Blade. That once again, they didn't announce at all. Another game that does this kind of stuff really, really well is actually WeCross, a Japanese trading card game. It is a little lewd with the anime waifus, but they do an absolutely freaking phenomenal job of making sure every card looks amazing, and they're so good at that. And I've noticed a lot of Japanese card games are like this. They ensure that their games look freaking amazing. So both WeCross and Zillions of Enemy X are card games that come to mind where you can tell that they really, really care about, like, they want their stuff to look as phenomenal as possible. And WeCross is actually going to be coming out in English in about a month or two, so I'm actually really excited to check that out in a greater capacity. I've already played WeCross and collected it a bunch. It's an absolutely phenomenal game. The head designer is actually a former Magic the Gathering Hall of Famer, Shota Yasuka, so it's a good game, and it definitely has like that great aesthetic. So if you're into that kind of aesthetics, bringing it back to aesthetics, if you're into that kind of aesthetics, it could be a game for you. I know this video isn't all encompassing, but it was something that I was thinking about while I was opening that booster box of Force of Will, and I just kind of wanted to talk about it. I can probably expand on this, and maybe we'll have a part 2 later as I come up with other things to think about. But the real key things that I wanted to talk about here, if this was a little rambly, because I feel that it was, is that aesthetics are so important and so integral to a card game that I believe they're as important as the other thing, which is gameplay, right? Because if a game doesn't look good, it's going to be really hard for people to try it out and to keep playing it and collecting it. And if a game doesn't play good, then it's going to be really, really hard to maintain that audience and get that word of mouth out. It's almost like aesthetics help get people into the game, and gameplay help keep people playing that game. When you're talking about collecting, it's a little bit different, but that's kind of like an overall way that I like to think about it. And they're so important. Both of those things are so important to a card game that without one or the other, I think your game's gonna really struggle, and it's gonna, probably not succeed, with so many good games out here doing just that with great aesthetics and great gameplay. It's going to be really hard for a game to succeed in the long run. I also wanted to talk about card borders, especially in regards to Force of Will, because man, I think the borders can really do it. Regardless of if your art looks good, the borders can absolutely freaking kill your game, man. It just make it so people are so uninterested, at least me, especially when they take up so much space, they're so washed out looking. And this is not just for Force of Will. I know that some other card games don't do borders very well either, but it's just a very, very important part of the game that I think you should really, as a game designer, should spend a lot of attention on. I think a new game like Sorcery is doing a fantastic job because they realize their art is the key part of the game, and they just show as much art as they can. And I think that's a brilliant idea because all the cards look freaking phenomenal. It might make it a little bit more difficult to play, but that's kind of the balance you're trying to hit here, right? The cards between looking good and playing great. And then also not trying to copy anyone else, because I think a lot of card games fall into the pitfall of trying to copy other more popular games, like Magic or something like that. And straying from that can be a huge boon to your game and bring in a lot of new eyes and a lot people who maybe are even playing Magic and just looking for something different. People who are playing Magic don't want to play Magic 2, right? They want to play Magic or maybe something super fresh and super new. The other key thing that I really wanted to hit upon, and we're kind of just recapping real quick here, is card recognizability. I think that is super, super important for many, many different reasons, from a gameplay standpoint, but also just from a player attachment standpoint. Having cards that are recognizable are important just because people latch onto them. They form these connections with these cards, with the artwork, and then, possibly with the artists. I know that's definitely true for me, like I said, with like stuff like the original Siobhan Dragon and Melissa Benson, and more currently with Flesh and Blood. I am a content creator who talks mostly about Flesh and Blood, but I love the art in the game, and I'm very passionate about supporting the artists because I think they are very, very underrated and undersupported, and they deserve like more recognition and more support. And I'm actually working with a couple of them to do some really cool things on the channel because I believe in their art, and I believe in them, and it's because of the card game, right? It's because I formed these attachments with the card game and with the art in the game that I feel this way, and that is kind of what I'm getting at. This like emotional response that you can get from a card game looking the way it does. Not just from the art, but from like an overall aesthetic perspective. If you like this video, please let me know. Comment down below. I'd also like to know what your favorite art is. In addition to that other comment that I said, if you watched this far, if you're here at the end, let me know what your favorite art is from any card game. Any card game. I'd be very, very interested to know. For me, like I said, Siobhan Dragon has always stuck with me, but there's so many others, so many others. It would be difficult to name it all. Maybe I should do a whole video. Should I do a whole video on card art that I like? I don't know. We'll see. I don't know if people would like that. Art videos usually don't do very good, but thank you for watching. Thank you for being here for this kind of like discussion. I really appreciate you being here, and we'll see you next time for some more card game content. Have a good one all. We'll see you later.